Okay, welcome to David and anybody else that might be checking this out later in the archives. Welcome to week 4 for MPD. Tonight's session won't be too long. Basically, there are no new assignments other than the discussion, of course. Remember to keep still working on Project 3. And in case you missed last week's session, because of the fact we don't have any new assignments, I just ask everybody to, if you didn't get a chance to check out last week's archive, just go ahead and check out that on our YouTube page or check out a previous month. And because that in that session we kind of went over Project 3 in detail. And here we're going to do the same thing, only in a little bit shorter version. And I'm going to show you some other student examples for Project 3. And but before going on, let me just make one quick announcement. There was one student. I don't think that she's here right now. But there was one student that had a question about the mastery journal assignment because they were confused. Um, just in case you happen to have taken like a leave of absence or whatever, and you went away for a while, and you're maybe coming back, and you saw this mastery journal assignment, and you saw this thing about Tumblr, and you were asking like, "What's that about?" Well, for those of you that are most of you that are here, you're well aware, you started with the mastery class and you did that Tumblr journal and you're continuing to do that through each month. If you weren't here when that started, though, just kind of a heads up, there is this new thing that starts with the mastery class in month 1, which is called the mastery journal assignment. And basically, that you do that through a Tumblr page. You set up a Tumblr, and each month you kind of add to that. That's what that assignment is about. So just a heads up that you'll probably have that same type of assignment in your next few classes as well. So just a heads up, just because there was one person that wasn't sure what that was about. They'd never heard of Tumblr before, or they weren't sure about that. So it's just something that was set up and they're doing right now, starting with the mastery class for month 1. So just a heads up about that. So for the discussion this week, it's pretty straightforward, pretty straight and easy. It's basically just reflect on your own media consumption and distribution, and how do you think things have changed. Like, for example, we have some students that said a pretty good way of putting it is that their grandfather, when they were alive, their grandparents, they would get up and they would pick up the newspaper, and that's how they got the news, through the newspaper. Then their parents, their generation, they would get up and they would turn on the TV or maybe listen to the radio, and that's how they got their news. In today's generation, it's neither newspapers or TV. Today, it's pretty much the internet, right? And just kind of reflect upon that. Some of you might still prefer the physical newspaper, or in terms of books, you might still prefer physical books over digital books, and maybe vice versa. Though maybe some people prefer the digital versions of the text that we consume as opposed to the physical ones. So again, there's no right or wrong answers to this. Just reflect on this, how your own media consumption has changed, and where do you see the future going. Like, for example, in terms of television, it's kind of funny because we used to ask this question, even 3 or 4 years ago, how many people don't have a television? And in the classroom, nobody would raise their hand because everybody has television. But today, you'd be surprised when we ask this in the classroom. About, I would say, maybe even up to maybe a quarter of the class says that they don't have televisions anymore. Because why? Because they see all their television, all their video experience on their computers these days. And that's becoming more and more common. And so that's another thing that you could talk about with this. And just talk about the big picture with publishing and distribution. Where do you see this headed in the future? For those of you that might be music fans, do you still buy physical CDs? We have some people who are real old school that still collect old vinyl records, right? But that's even more for collection purposes. It's not for to play the music, right? But some of you might only rely on electronic music, digital music, MP3s and that sort of thing. So just reflect on that. When's the last time you bought a CD, for example, or a DVD for that matter, or something like that, right? So that's the discussion this week. Just make sure to do, 2 postings as usual, one by tomorrow night at midnight for the initial post, one response post by Sunday, and that's the discussion for this week. So once again, just a reminder again, we're not going to go into this in that much detail because we kind of did that last week, but just going over some of the highlights that we talked about last week. Kim, for her project, she basically did Project 3, exactly what you guys are doing, right? So when it came time to publish her book, she could have gone with her old agents, her traditional agent who she had published with before, right? In other words, she could have done projects 1 and 2 like you guys did, right? But she decided to do this new self-publishing experiment in Project 3, right? So that's what she basically did. She had her book, and she kind of defined what her markets would be. Her type of book deals with this, alleged lesbian vampire who serial killer, right? So some of the niche markets she could appeal to were legal scholars, people that were interested in 16th century European history, people that were interested maybe in vampires or legends or something like that. So she had a lot of niche markets to work with, right? So that's one of the things that she defined. Her book, as a once again, just a reminder, her book is about Countess Erzsébet Bathory, who is this supposed lesbian serial killer vampire who is in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the world's most notorious serial killer. She was alleged to have killed over 650 people. In fact, and not only did she kill them, but she was alleged to have dined in their blood or bathed in their blood as sort of a way to make herself feel younger or look younger. So a lot of this stuff was just legends and stuff like that. So that's what Kim's book is about. She went back and she did the legal transcripts, and she was able to put that all into a book and to basically spell out once and for all what or how much of these stories are true and how much of them are just folklore, right? And so, anyways, she did a SWOT analysis just like you guys are doing for Project 3. She did choose CreateSpace for her print on demand. Once again, this is not an endorsement. In fact, some of you on the music side in last week's discussion got into a few um, arguments, friendly arguments about what's better, CD Baby or TuneCore. And once again, there is no right or wrong answer to these things. A lot of times it's just like what print on demand company works best for your needs, right? We had some people on the book side that said that they liked Blurb, right? And other people said that they don't like Blurb. Again, whatever you want to choose for Project 3, it's fine as long as you can explain the print on demand company that you chose and why you chose it, right? So she chose CreateSpace. So that's the one that she used. She came up with the brand. This brand, this picture appears on the cover of the book. It appears on the website. And you guys already had the branding class with Ken way back in the day. And you learned about branding, right? So that's one of the things you want to do is have consistent brands and have an official website. I think it was Howard last week in the go-to session noted that I think Daddy um, or one of those sites just charges something like $1.99 per month or something like that for a web host. Pretty cheap. Way more inexpensive than it used to be. Even five years ago, right? So once again, with CreateSpace, you're able to, and not just CreateSpace, but with any good print-on-demand company, you should be able to get your product out there for worldwide distribution on sites like iTunes if you're a musician, on sites like Amazon.com if you're selling a CD, a book, or a movie for that matter, DVD, things like that. So worldwide distribution. A good print-on-demand company will also get you the barcode. It'll get you the ISBN number, things like that. And then we kind of left off with here with in terms of marketing. Now, one of the things that actually, you know what? Okay, yeah, okay. We kind of left off around here. We were talking about marketing, and the last few chapters in the textbook kind of go over this, right? They kind of look at social media marketing, and not just social media marketing as a concept or as a subject, but just this overall idea of social media and how powerful it is. Now, one of the things that we do in class and by the way, if you haven't started yet on Project 3, here we have in our resources 5 exercises to help you prepare that you can answer these, and this should help you prepare. And a lot of you already have your print on demand company selected anyways at this point, but these are 5 exercises that you can have that should help you, right? Um, oh, and of course, before we move on, one thing we should mention too is remember that the Google Docs are due on Sunday of this week as well. So in addition to the discussion and finishing up Project 3, just make sure to go ahead and do your last minute Google Doc posts, right? And but looking at the last few chapters, starting with chapter 21, it's all about social media and the power of social media. And we can go through the definitions here. It can be defined as media created for the dissemination through social interaction and things like that. But pretty much, you're all aware of what social media is. And just one of the things to note, though, is that a lot of people think of social when they think of social media, they think of Facebook, and they think of going on Facebook and telling everybody about the latest movie that you saw, or the latest restaurant that you went to, or something like that, or what's on your mind. That's literally what Facebook asks you, right? But keep in mind that social media can be very powerful in terms of marketing, in terms of getting your message across, in terms of coming up with an official site. I mean, in addition to your site that you can have on your own through GoDaddy.com or whatever server you're going through, you can have a Facebook site, and of course that's free, right? Twitter's free, YouTube is free. In class, we show you the video. We can't show videos here in this GoToMeeting here, but Kim actually did a promotional video on YouTube, right? She just did something that you guys can all do on your own computer. You guys are all very talented and skilled with like things like Final Cut Pro and things like that. Or even if you don't have Final Cut Pro, just using just the basic Mac stuff that you have that comes with your computer, iMovie, basically, you can come up with. You guys are very good at the creative realm and coming up with creative promotional videos and things like that. That's what Kim did, right? You can actually look it up on YouTube if you want. Just type in like "infamous lady" or something like that. You'll see it's like a 2-minute like promotional thing, no words or anything like that, but just music and pictures that Kim used and sent out to kind of promote her book. And you guys can all do that, right? And some examples of social media. One of the things that we show in class too, again, we can't, in this platform, we can't show videos through GoToMeeting, but if you want to check this out, you can. It's free. It's available on Frontline's website, or just if you want to just type in PBS, go to PBS's website. It's a Frontline video, and it's totally free because it's PBS. You won't have to watch a commercial, but so you can type in this address, or just go to Google and just type in Frontline, and I think the video is called Revolution in Cairo or something like that. And it's a really interesting video that we show in class. It's about 20 minutes long, and it takes a look at the power of social media, and in this case, not so much in the business context, but in terms of politics. What happened in Egypt a few years ago is that the people of Egypt, they wanted to kind of start a revolution and kind of overthrow the government. But the problem is that in Egypt and other countries in that area is that there's a lot of censorship. There's a lot of what we call in media studies authoritarian media systems there. And as a result, another similar thing would be like China, right? And this is kind of going off on a tangent a little bit, but if you're in China and you do a search on Google for like Tiananmen Square, what is going to come up? Nothing but tourist sites about Tiananmen Square, right? If you're here in America and you're on Google and you do a search for Tiananmen Square, what's going to come up is the 1989 riots, right? But in China, the Chinese government censors some of that stuff, right? And it's a very similar situation in the Middle East in a lot of these countries. And so, anyways, long story short is that these people wanted to kind of overthrow the government, but they couldn't really do it in the traditional way, right? Because they couldn't put it, newspaper ads or anything that they try to even put, even for the most part, even stuff that was online that would be censored, right? But they were able to use Facebook, and to a smaller extent Twitter, but mostly Facebook, and they were able to organize riots, and they were able to kind of overthrow the government. And this also had like kind of a domino effect, because not only did this happen in Egypt, but then later on Tunisia, and then there were some other countries that did this as well. So the point of all this, though, is that social media can be very, very powerful, more powerful than you think, especially in today's world, right? And in terms of getting back to business here, Eric Qualman wrote a book, and Kim mentions this in the textbook as well. But Eric Qualman wrote a book in 2009. At this point, there's probably a second or third edition out in 2014. But the book is called Socialnomics, and he goes into detail about how businesses who don't use social media in their marketing are kind of losing out, right? Now, there's one thing that the book, that Kim's textbook, does not talk about, but I'll just mention it here, and I may have mentioned this last week, but I'll just kind of talk about it again real quickly. in terms of social media marketing, there's a very controversial technique of marketing called stealth marketing or undercover marketing. And what this is, and before I go on, let me just say that there are some people that are ethically opposed to it, right? You might think that this is a really, really, really bad thing to do, but nonetheless, I'm just saying that a lot of businesses do this. Okay, so I'm not advocating it, I'm not condemning it, I'm not condoning it, but I'm just saying that this is very popular in terms of social media marketing. It's called stealth marketing or undercover marketing. And what this is, it's marketing to people who don't know that they're being marketed to. So what that means in an entertainment business context is that sometimes if you go on like the Internet Movie Database, for those of you that are film fans, you know how sometimes, if you go down, scroll all the way down to the bottom, they have message boards. Well, a lot of movie companies go on the Internet Movie Database as avatars and they pretend to be real people. And what they do is they hype up certain movies, right? That's marketing to people in an undercover way. So people on the other end don't know that they're talking to Warner Brothers, right? They don't know that they're reading messages from Warner Brothers. In their mind, they're reading messages from Joe Schmo, the average movie-going fan who says, "Oh my gosh, this movie is the greatest thing ever. You have to check it out," or something like that. It's called stealth marketing. Also, from this standpoint as well, there are companies that go online and they create avatars and go on Facebook and they try to hype up certain products. Again, ethically, you might be opposed to this, but I'm just saying that a lot of companies do this. Um, in another context or another situation, you can go on YouTube, and again, I can't show videos here, but you can go on YouTube and just type in 60 minutes undercover marketing or something like that, or 60 minutes stealth marketing, and you can see the video. Now, the video that's on YouTube is an abbreviated version of it. They cut the thing down into like 5 minutes long. But the whole thing, actually, I have it on disc right here. The whole thing, it's about 15 minutes long. But the one on YouTube, you can see it's like 5 minutes long. But anyways, what they do is that they show you how it's a little bit dated too. This is like back in like the early 2000s. So now this seems a little bit dated. But what they were doing is that like when some of these phone companies were coming out and they were producing cell phones, they were creating cell phones that had cameras in them. Now nowadays every cell phone has a camera in it, right? But at the time in the early 2000s, that was kind of a cool thing. That was kind of a rare thing. So what these companies were doing, companies like Sprint and Verizon and stuff like in companies like that, what they would do is they would put people on the streets of like New York City or in airports. And what they would do is they would get some people to, just stranger to come by, and they would ask them, okay, hey, can you take a picture of us? And then you'd give them the phone, and the person would say, wait a minute, this isn't a camera, this is just a phone. And they'd say, oh no, no, it's a camera too, you see. And that was kind of a way of getting the word out. Oh my gosh, this is cool, a cell phone that takes pictures, right? But the people don't know that the person that's asking them to take the picture is a person that works for Sprint or Verizon or one of those companies, right? It's undercover marketing so that the people. And another instance that they show in the 60 minutes video is in the video game industry. There's a company, I forget which one, but they were trying to promote some type of like a glove, basically, where you could play a game with the glove with your hands. And they would they would put somebody like in an airport or whatever, or in a coffee shop, and they would be playing a game. And the goal is that people would walk by and say, "Oh my gosh, what's that guy doing?" And then they would stop, they would look, and they would start asking questions, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's really cool," right? But they don't know that that person is being paid by whatever video game company out there to kind of promote the product. Or in another sinister example, what they show you in the video is that tobacco companies sometimes face challenges with advertising, right? Because there's lots of laws in certain places where it's not legal for them to advertise in a certain way, right? So as a way to kind of get around that, sometimes what they'll do is they'll pay undercover people, these undercover kids, to go to bars in New York City or wherever it might be, and just smoke a certain brand of cigarettes. And the goal is to get people to walk by, notice the brand that they're smoking, and then maybe even say, hey, can I have one of those? So it's called undercover marketing. It's very sneaky, it's very deceptive, and you might be opposed to it. But I'm just saying that a lot of companies out there do that. So the next time that you're on Facebook and you see somebody hyping up a product, be very, very careful, right? Because you never know if they're being um, paid to do that, right? As an undercover marketing. And by the way, too, if you're interested in this concept, there was a movie that came out a few years ago called The Joneses with Demi Moore and David Duchovny. And the premise of that movie is that they are stealth marketers. In other words, they move into a neighborhood and they act like they're this new family that's in the neighborhood, the new family on the block. But what the neighbors don't realize is that they're all stealth marketers. So, for example, David Duchovny will befriend the neighbors, and then they'll go golfing, and then he'll pull out his new Nike driver and he'll say, "This is the best club that I ever had," whatever. And then he'll hit a beautiful drive. And then what happens the next week when they play golf again? The neighbors that he just played with, they all have the same new Nike driver, right? So the goal is to act like you're this average citizen, but they don't know that they're being paid in this case by Nike or whatever it might be. So it's called stealth marketing. Just something that you might want to consider in your project 3. On the other hand, you might say that that's deceptive, it's ethically dishonest, and there's a lot of people that feel that way. So, but I just wanted to point that out that that does exist, okay? But the point of getting back to project 3 though, the point of project 3 is that in your marketing strategy, whatever strategy you decide, you need to explain it. And I'll show you some examples for each of the 4 teams. I'll show you an example of a book, I'll show you an example of a music project, a film project, and a video game here for project 3. So in case you missed last week's or in case you wanted to see other examples, just hang on for a couple minutes because we'll get to those here in a second. But just the last thing I wanted to point out is, again, we talked about this briefly last week, but there was an author who was not much older than most of you. In fact, she was about your age for most of you when she was doing her version of Project 3, and her name is Amanda Hawking. And she basically started out doing exactly what you guys did for Projects 1 and 2. She drafted a query letter, sent it to various agents. She had her book proposal done, and she sent that to certain agents. But unfortunately, she had a lot of not just bad luck, but I mean, she had a difficult time contacting people or getting them to contact her back, right? So she was a little bit frustrated. So she decided to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do what you guys are doing for Project 3." She said, "Okay, if I can't get a traditional publisher the old fashioned way, then I'm going to try this new self publishing model and see if I can make this work." And sure enough, she did. Now, she started out doing what's known as the micro pricing model, meaning that she was an author and she had certain amount of books. It says 17 books here, but she started out by doing kind of small versions, kind of smaller books, if you will, novellas, not novels, but novellas, just small book projects, short stories, maybe a little bit longer than short stories, but basically just selling them for very cheap, like 99 cents or $3. And by doing this, though, she was able to get slowly a fan base. Okay. And she developed a fan base, and I don't know if I have the statistics here on the screen here, but she also used CreateSpace. Once again, that's not an endorsement. It's just one that she used. You can see here that she started out by doing 99 cents to $2.99. Through Kindle sales, she was able to make more royalties this way, as you see, higher percentage at least, 70%, as opposed to the old model. Remember, projects 1 and 2, if you were an author and you were able to get published, you would get about a 15% royalty, okay? But here, doing it through a print on demand, through Kindle, it's about 70%, and I don't have it on here, but if you sell it, like in Kim's case, if you sell a hard copy of your book, the royalty rates were about 40%, okay? Still much higher than that 15% doing it the old way, right? In fact, this new self-publishing model is so successful that you will see now a lot of even well-known authors are going the self-publishing route, right? It's not just, now you have some authors, of course, traditionally, like, J.K. Rowling and people like that, who are going to get, a co-publishing deal, which is like a 50-50, or a lot of other well-known authors will get like a large advance from a traditional publisher. Okay, that's good for them. But remember, a lot of us are independent. We don't have that sort of credibility yet in the industry. So for a lot of us, doing it the self-publishing way, is another alternative to that. And in fact, Amanda Hawking is so successful now. I think I mentioned this last time, but her one of her books, not her last book or whatever, but one of her books now is being talked about being turned into a movie, and the person that's going to adapt it is the same writer who adapted District 9 from a couple years ago. So I think they're still working out the details now in terms of money and stuff like that. But I believe that's in the works, so that'll probably be coming out, like next year or something like that. And the point, though, too, is that with Project 3, once you are successful, like in this case, Amanda Hawking, once she was able to get like you know, hundreds of thousands of fans, and now that she is successful, now that she's a multimillionaire, now all of a sudden, all the old traditional publishers are coming to her and trying to offer her deals now for her next book and trying to give her big advances to publish her next book and things like that. So this is kind of doing it the reverse, if that makes sense. So instead of doing projects 1 and 2, if you can't do it that way, sometimes you can do project 3. And remember, you get to keep your copyright with project 3 with a good print on demand company. Then, if that's successful, then you can sell the rights to another large publisher if you want them to help you. And in fact, that's exactly what happened to Kim recently, although she didn't take the deal yet. But just about a month ago, she was offered through a traditional publisher. A traditional publisher came to her and offered to buy the rights of her book. Now Kim hasn't sold it yet, so she's still maybe thinking about it, or maybe she just decided not to do it. I don't know at this point. I guess I have to ask her next time I see her. But that's what happened in her case, right? So there's, again, we can't have interviews, or I can't show you videos here, but if you want to see an interview, you can just go on YouTube and just type in Amanda Hawking, and you can see some interviews with her. Also, those of you that are interested, I'm not sure that we have any computer science people here, but if you are interested in creating apps, remember that there are sources out there where you can do that. In this case, this is also mentioned in Kim's book at the last few chapters, but there's one 14-year-old kid who developed a game, a social game, and it was very, very popular. And it makes you wonder, I mean, if a 14-year-old kid can do this, then there's no reason why that any of you that are talented in computer science or have an interest in that, in creating apps and social games and things like that, can't do that as well, right? So he used a tool, if you want to take a look at the details here, and he was only in 8th grade, remember? And so those are the details on him. And then also, and once again, there's another interview with him if you want to check that out later on. And remember, all these slides that I'm going through are in our resources too, by the way. They're just under the name slides, so you can check those out. And just the last example here was a web series. Actually, 2 more examples I want to give because something just happened in the last week that I want to talk about. But one last example before that, though, is the show called Imaginary Bitches, okay? And that was the name of the show, Imaginary Bitches. But they produced a show and they took it to networks, and it's just kind of a pilot, right? Like, just, hey, here's what we did. Are you interested in buying the rights to it, right? And the network said, no, we're not interested in it. So they decided, well, we already have this, and it's produced, and it's got professional people involved with it. In fact, this girl here, I forget her name, but she's in several shows and movies. She was actually in the first American Pie movie briefly, at the very beginning at Stifler's party. But they had professional actors, they had professional directors, and so they said, you know what? Well, let's turn this. Let's see what we can do if we put this on the web and just sell it through, or make money through advertising revenue. And sure enough, they did, and they were successful. In fact, the latest, and you can see here some of the stats here. It was first produced in 2008, but the last that I heard is that they're actually going to produce this now in 2015, I think, as an actual show. And I'm not sure the network or the syndication, but that's the latest. So again, this is another example how they took the old model. They couldn't get their stuff out there with the old model. In other words, take it to an agent, see if you can find a publisher or a TV station. They couldn't do it that way, so they said, okay, we're going to try it ourselves, doing it online as a web series. And keep in mind, they did it they showed it for free, and we're making money off of advertising money. But there's But there's certainly another way that you could do this as well, by selling it through like iTunes or something like that, as like a 99-cent download or something like that. And that's another model that you could opt for. And they were able to do it at the old way, and now they're coming back and reversing it, and now a traditional TV station or network is going to be interested in producing this. So it's kind of doing project 3 first, and then later on doing project 1 and 2, if you want, if that makes sense. um, but then the last example that I wanted to talk about, though, and I did mention this last week, but I mentioned that the Angry Video Game Nerd, if you're familiar with him, you can just do a Google search for Angry Video Game Nerd. He runs a site called cinemassacre.com, I think it is. And he started out by just doing these kind of humorous videos and putting them on his website, where he would take a look at old bad video games, like from Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, things like that. And he would just do videos on them and make fun of them. And recently, in the last year, he actually turned this enterprise into and took it and basically made a full length movie. And it's called the Angry Video Game Nerd Movie. And the reason why I bring this up is that it just came out in the last week. He took it to various film festivals across the country, I found out. And later on this year, now keep in mind, if you do a short film or even a feature length film, sometimes it is difficult to get into film festivals. I know. I mean, here in Orlando, we have the Florida Film Festival, but even that's a little bit difficult to get into. But if you're lucky to be able to be a part of film festivals, that's always a great option. So just keep that on your mind. If you're a filmmaker and you want to try that out, just go to the website of the film festival, and usually they'll have like submission requirements and stuff like that. But it's an avenue worth exploring for some of you. But aside from that, though, what he's also going to be doing with this movie is that later on he's going to be creating a simultaneous DVD release. And I'm not sure what company he's going through. I'm not sure if he's doing it through print on demand, or he's probably well known enough now that he probably has a legitimate distributor. He might not be self publishing and distributing it, but nonetheless, though, he could, though, is what I'm saying. And he's also going to be offering it as a digital download later on through his website. So the point of all this, though, as I kind of wrap this up, and before I show you some examples of Project 3 from other students, the point of all this is that several years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we didn't have these options as independent people, as independent artists, whatever field you're going into, whether it's video games like the Angry Video Game Nerd, whether it's a filmmaker or a creator of a television show like this that gets turned into a web series, whether it is a music artist, whether it is an author like Amanda Hawking, whatever it was, about 5 to 7 years ago, we didn't have these options, right? But today, thanks to print on demand, we do have a way to kind of fight back against the mega, ultra successful companies and publishers that are out there. So, whereas 5 years ago you would be distressed, and I think I showed you guys an example, right? We told you guys of an example of our friends in Suzanne, who could not get published several years ago, and because she couldn't get published, she was a little bit upset with that, and she was very distraught. Well, now we have ways to kind of counter that, and we do have ways to become successful, even if we can't get in through the huge publishers and the huge companies like that. So we do have ways as independent artists to become successful these days. And just the last thing too, to kind of wrap this up, is to say that a lot of you, when we started this class, a lot of you may have had some ideas about some of the projects that you've been working on. But here I'm going to kind of close by saying that these are things that you should really consider doing in the future. In fact, we have students all the time that come back and tell us about the stuff that they were able to produce and that are now available, like on Amazon.com or through iTunes or things like that, because they actually did take the projects that they did in these classes for real, and they are doing them and they are producing them and creating them in a variety of fields, right? I think I may have mentioned this at the beginning, but we have one student that did a book on beer pong of all subjects, right? He did a book on beer pong strategy or something like that, and I'm not sure what his sales are, but we have other students that have worked on their music projects. We have another student that is recently in the last few stages of finalizing her book, and she's going to be doing that through CreateSpace, and some other examples too with like film and stuff like that. Even video games. I think we've had students in the past that have actually gone through Steam. One student in particular, I haven't talked to him in a while, but this is maybe like maybe about 8 or 9 months ago. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he was actually going to do his project and do it through Steam. Exactly what he did in this class. So uh, don't be a stranger. Let us know if you guys do these things for real, because we always love to hear about any success stories. So whether the projects that you did in this class really relate 100% to your final business plan, or whether they relate 0%. In any case, these are things that you should start to consider doing for real if you want to do this. Or even if it's not right now, maybe after graduation, you have an idea that you did for a project in this class that you want to say, hey, you know what, maybe I should go back and try to do that for real. Maybe something to consider, because these can always be, even if you're not going to become like a millionaire as an author or as a record producer. Maybe some of you will, but even if you're not, these are always good projects that you can do as kind of supplemental ways to make money. So, and as I mentioned, in Kim's case, she's made over like $60,000 or $70,000 on her book, basically doing this, since 2009 or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's not. If you look at the 5 years, $60,000 or $70,000, that's not a lot per year. But hey, as a supplemental income, that can be something that's very successful. And imagine if she had 5 or 6 projects like some of you guys can do. So just keep these things in mind. Now, before I go on, I'm just looking at the chat box if you guys have any questions about this before I show you some examples for project 3. Okay, so let's take a look here at some examples. Let's start with I believe this is a book. I took the student's name out for to keep her anonymous, but yeah, this is a book example. Okay, now the examples I'm going to show you are not maybe 100% perfect, but for the most part, these are good. Let's go through some of the highlights about the strengths and weaknesses for these. Okay, now this is for a book. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't have to be an APA paper. One thing right off the bat that I'll just say to comment on this paper, this example, not that it's a big thing, but technically speaking, business documents like this should actually be single spaced. You see how I think she has this spaced about 1.5 spaces. So one thing that we could do here if we go is let's just go to this section here, go up the top and just go to formatting the paragraph. And we'll just change this to, see how this is 1.5. We'll just make this single, okay? Again, not a big deal. You won't lose any points, but technically speaking, a business document like this should be single spaced. So it should be something like this. And you'll see here, once again, the mission statement for this project. Remember, it's not the mission for your company, but it's the mission for the book. So in this case, the name of the book is A Teen's Guide to Succeed in High School. And what she says about the mission of it is it's to help teens think about what they want to do with their life. This book should act as a guide to help the teens set goals and so on and so forth. So the point is, and keep in mind, she's got a couple typos here. I mean, teens should be like that. It shouldn't have an apostrophe there. But anyways, aside from typos though, the mission statement is pretty good, right? Because remember, it's the mission about the book. So for the mission statement, you want to have a mission about your project, right? Not the mission for your company. The next section is the executive summary. And once again, I took her name and put it as XXXXX. But it's just a short biography, right? Remember, you can use some of the same stuff that you did for project 2 and kind of redo that for project 3. That's okay. You can't really get caught for self-plagiarizing in this class, right? So it's okay to reuse. Now, the one thing I would say is that she has probably a executive summary that's a little bit too long. You really don't need to go into this much detail. In fact, it's probably not necessary. But I just wanted to point out, though, on that note, that remember that there is no page minimum or maximum, but as I said last week, to give you an idea, the students that tend to do the best on this project are the ones that do include the most detail. Now, this section, the executive summary, you don't need that much detail, but just keep in mind here that if you look down here at the word count, she's got like 3,000 words, which is quite a bit, right? You don't necessarily need that, and remember, there is no minimum maximum, but in general, the more, the better, usually. Next section, she talks about the company. Remember, this section is about the company. The mission statement is not about the company, but the company description, of course, is about the company. Okay, the next thing is the product. Remember, in this case, it's a book, so she just tells a little bit about what the book is about. Maybe going into a little bit more about the appeal of the book. Maybe talking about what separates it from the competitors. And the next section is the most important one of Project 3, manufacturing and distribution, right? So here, if we just take a look, again, we're not going to like read the content line by line here, but in her case, she's using CreateSpace, okay? Which is fine. There's no right or wrong answer as to what print-on-demand company you want to use. She's not only explaining which company she's using, but she's going to explain why she chose it, right? What are its advantages? And remember that last week's discussion was all about this. So you're welcome to use some of the things that you mentioned in last week's discussion about why you chose the print-on-demand company you did in terms of research. So she talks about she's going to be using digital distribution. Remember, print-on-demand companies, you could set the price for your product. In this case, she's going to be selling it for $12.79. She talks about royalty percentages. Now, this I have to be honest here. I think that she got some of this information wrong. At least the way that I'm reading this now, I don't think that she's accurate with these percentages. But nonetheless, you want to make sure that you do double check the percentages that you cite here. If you do cite percentages, make sure that they're accurate. Now, one quick thing I just thought of here while we're here is let me just quickly go to Amazon, or I'm sorry, CreateSpace. I just want to show you this, and again, I'm using CreateSpace as a model, but I mean, again, this is not an endorsement of CreateSpace. Remember, you can use any print-on-demand company that you want, but I just want to show you something here. If we go to down here to royalties, okay, this is some of the research that you want to do for Project 3. Okay, you want to be able to figure out what you're going to sell your book for and how much you're going to make per unit sold. Now, most good print-on-demand companies will have some type of chart like this, right? Where let's just say that we're going to do black and white, and let's just say that we're going to do, let's try 6x9, and let's just say this book is 200 pages, okay? A good site like this will allow you to calculate the royalties. And if we hit calculate here, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't put the price. Let's just say that, okay, we're using hers. We'll say $12.79, and we go to calculate. This brings up the amount of royalties that you'll make per unit sold. So you can see here, because CreateSpace is owned by Amazon, that's where you're going to make the most money if you sell a physical copy, right? So out of the $12.79, you're earning $4.42, which I believe, like I said, comes out to about 40% there or thereabouts, right? So about 40%, which is $4.42. eStore, which I guess would be Kindle, right? Remember, you make more because obviously, if you're selling a digital copy, they don't actually have to physically manufacture the pages and the cover and stuff like that. So obviously, it's not going to cost them anything to make. So you're making a higher percentage, about $6.98 for that. I believe that comes out to probably close to, I'm going to say 55% or 60% or something like that. Expanded distribution, you're making not that much, right? You're only making 186. Now, the argument for this though is like, Kim would say, because she's talked about this before, it's like, well, do I really want to offer expanded distribution? And by the way, that would mean, like, for example, if you're on another site besides Amazon or another site that's not affiliated with Amazon, that's what expanded distribution would be. So you're not making quite as much money. And Kim, the argument for this, for not doing expanded distribution, would be like, no, if I'm going to sell my book, I'm not going to settle for 186, right? But in Kim's case, she ultimately decided on expanded distribution because she said, well, I guess it's better than nothing, right? I want them to buy my book through Amazon or through Kindle, ideally. But if worse comes to worse, I mean, I guess I'll take 186 because that's better than having them not buy it at all, right? So that's what expanded distribution is. So, anyways, though, getting back to the idea of this, though, the point is that for Project 3, when you talk about manufacturing and distribution, you want to include the financial information like this. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to include projections and stuff like that that you did for maybe Mike Koch's class, the finance class. You don't have to include projections or stuff like that, but try to at least include basic stuff like what your royalty rates are, how much you're going to sell the book for, or the CD for, whatever it is, and how much money you're going to make per unit sold, stuff like that. And then she also talks about how a good site like CreateSpace will give her the ISBN number, and she talks about the distribution deal not being exclusive, meaning that if she doesn't like CreateSpace and she wants to say, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else and sell it, then I can. You can do that. And then marketing and promotion. And this is kind of what these last few chapters in the textbook are about. You know, you want to use social media, you want to use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, things like that. If you do, you don't have to, but if you do traditional advertising, you know, stuff like TV, radio, magazine, stuff like that, you want to include that. Um, the one thing to say about that, though, is remember, like I said, the students that provide the most detail tend to do the best. So what I mean by that is that if you're going to say that you're going to do magazine advertising, okay, but then specify what magazines and why you chose them, if that makes sense, right? So the more detail that you can provide. So in other words, as you're going through the project, ask yourselves why a lot. Why am I choosing this magazine? Why am I going to be using the Facebook site? Why am I going to be doing this? Why am I going to be doing that? If you can answer that question why a lot of times, you should be able to come up with plenty of detail, right? And then, you know, target market. She includes the cover of the book here, which is not necessary, in her logo here. That's not necessary. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, you can. She talks about competitive titles. And not only that, but she talks about somewhere in here, I remember she talks about why her book is different and what makes her book unique. Somewhere in here. Oh, one thing to note though, you see how right here where she says, because I have experience in all these fields, you want to make sure to keep this in the third person. So let's just say that, you know, her last name was Smith. You would say, because Smith has experience in, you know, keep this in the third person, because this is a business document. Remember, this is an APA. So, and then just a brief conclusion. Okay. So that's an example of a book. Let me show you another example here. Let's go to the next example here. Let's look at games. Okay. Now, once again, you don't need a fancy cover page like this, but this student did. Now, in this case, though, once again, this is double spaced. Remember, ideally, you would want to have this single spaced. And just looking at this now, this is not a perfect example because right here, the student is talking about his company. He's talking about Iconoclast Games develops the most exciting and immersive titles. Okay, that's an example of what you want to avoid. You don't want to talk about the company here. Remember, the mission statement, you know, your final business plan you'll do in month 12. That's different. That's the mission statement for your company. Here, for this project, we're only focusing on the project for the mission statement, okay? So the mission statement should be about the project, not the company. Then, once again, just a brief bio, which he provides here. Technically speaking, you see here how he should technically have an indent with each paragraph. You see what I just did here, like up here? You should indent each paragraph. But actually, let me take that back though, because this should be single spaced. What you should have it is like this. You should actually have it look something like this. So it's single spaced, and then you would want to have another space between the paragraphs like that, like I just did, okay? But then the next part though is the company description. Once again here, I'm just looking at this. See here how he says how we do this. Remember, you want to make sure to keep this in the third person. So you would avoid things like we and I. It should be something like this. How they do this, right? How they do this. Okay. Okay, next is the product. Now he's talking about the game, the first game that they're going to be releasing. It's called Ether, right? That should be up here in the mission statement though as well. The mission statement should be about what this game Ether is about. Okay? So just a little bit of information about the game. Then manufacturing and distribution, he's going to be using Steam. That seems to be the most popular one for video games. So he's going to be using Steam. He's talking about the features that Steam provides, the popularity of it, its greenlit program, the details about the submission charge, things like that. He talks about royalties. The format of the game, how it's going to be distributed, is downloadable file, right? He's also got some typos here. Again, not to nitpick this too much right now, but he does a pretty good job of describing why he's chose Steam, right? Some of the advantages and some of the same stuff that I remember he talked about in the discussion board the previous week before, right? Which is a lot of what you guys can do as well. Just talk in a lot of your cases about the discussion that you talked about last week, right? Because you can draw on some of the same exact things. Now he goes into like these mathematical formulas. Some of that might not be necessary, but it can't hurt. And so you get the idea. So in his case, he's using Steam. Marketing and promotion, he's providing his logos. You don't need to do that, but you can. Remember, a good site for doing that, though, if you want to, is a site called logochefs.com. Okay. Now, with marketing and promotion, he actually goes into demographics, which is good. So in this case, he's saying that the target market would be the core gamers whose average age is 30 and to play games at a higher rate than casual gamers. So again, he's going to be using Facebook, Twitter, things like that. And you get the idea. And then you just kind of cap it off with just a brief conclusion. So that's an example of games. Okay, next example, let's look at okay, let's look at a film here. Now, this film, okay, this student I remember, she did hers on a film called All the Best Girls, right? And as you can see here, she does the mission statement correct. She talks about the mission of the film. It seeks to entertain through exploring the depths of the human mind and the reliability of memory. The film features a complex female heroine whose personality, appearance, and upbringing do not compromise her intelligence and determination as a detective. The lead character struggles to overcome her fears without allowing her traumatic experiences to define her, a lesson that has the potential to inspire survivors everywhere to reject reject a victim mentality. Okay, so the mission is of the film, right? That's a good example. And you also notice here that she has the right format. She has the single spaced block format, we call it. Executive summary, just information about yourself, what makes you credible, talk about your education, experience, background. The company itself, under company description, in this case, it's going to be a film production company that specializes in these certain genres. It's going to be based out of Washington, D.C. The product, again, is about the film. And most important here is manufacturing and distribution, right? So here she's talking about she's going to be using CreateSpace, and that's how she's going to distribute the film. And again, you can go on, you can read the whole thing here, but you'll see here what we've talked about before in this class. A good print-on-demand site like CreateSpace takes care of printing DVDs as orders come in, remember? So you don't need minimum order requirements. And that's the reason why print-on-demand is good. Then she talks about their percentage that they take out, right? 4.95 per unit and 45% per sale. And then digital distribution. Now, just looking at this, the one thing I would say, and again, this is your project, so I'm not gonna you're not gonna lose any points for this, but I mean, 16.99 for a DVD, that's seems to me to be kind of expensive these days. But again, I'm just kind of viewing that as more of like a if I were a potential investor in this, I would maybe say you might want to lower the price a little bit because 16.99 is quite a bit for a DVD these days, at least. At least I think so. I don't know, but okay. Nonetheless, though, 16.99 and rental price 3.99, purchase price for 11.99. I assume that's I assume she means digital for that. Okay. In any case, though, she goes through the numbers here. And you don't have to provide projections or anything like that. But she looks at additional methods of distribution. I think somewhere in here, I think she mentions film festivals, but I'm not sure. But in any case, though, she does a pretty good job, though, of explaining everything, though. Okay, so you get the idea there. And then marketing and promotion, she's going to be using Facebook, a company website, Twitter. She talks about the demographics of her market, which is really good for marketing and promotion. That's one thing that you want to do if possible is provide. Remember, we talked about the niche markets, remember? So talk about any target market or niche market that you have for your project. Oh yeah, okay, so she does talk about film festivals. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to mention these if you're on Team Film. These are just some of the ones that she's suggesting, but that doesn't mean that you have to do these. But it can't hurt. A lot of these film festivals, like I said, don't really cost a lot of money to try to enter. I mean, some of them do have certain requirements in terms of like duration and content and things like that. But hey, these are some of the things that you want to take a look at as you go forward if you do produce a film for real. Okay, and then just a brief conclusion. Okay, so you get the idea. Again, remember that there is no word count, minimum or maximum or page count, but you can see here that this is a pretty good project, and this came out to about 1,600, over 1,600 words. So that kind of gives you maybe a good idea. Okay, and then last but not least, we'll look at music here. So once again, I took the student's name out and I put in X's there to make him anonymous. Okay, once again, this is another case where technically speaking, you would want to have this single spaced, not 1.5 spaced like he's got it here. So we'll just go ahead right now and just do this real quickly, okay? Okay, so this is project 3 for an EP, okay? And the artist's name is Zahara. I don't think this is the student. I think this is the artist the student is representing, if I recall correctly. But in any case, though, they talk about their EP. It's called Extraordinary Life. Remember, the mission of the EP, right, is to enlighten people about the power of music. Remember, not the mission statement of your company, but the mission statement of the album. Technically speaking, if you want to get real technical, it's not a huge deal, but any title like this, like Extraordinary Life, he puts it in quotes. Technically speaking, a title like this should actually be in italics like that. So if we go up here to the top, it would be like this. The name of a song would be in quotations, but the name of the album itself would be in italics like that, okay? But you see here that pretty good mission statement, though. The music project will give fans the opportunity to express themselves by showcasing their creative music content, okay? Executive summary, just once again, just a little bit about himself here. And you can, as I said, reuse some of the same stuff that you did for Project 2 for that, okay? Then the company description doesn't have to be terribly long. Just a little bit of information about the company, like where it's located, maybe some of the core people involved in it, and what the company does. That's all you have to really state about that, okay? Then the product itself is, once again, it's this EP, inspired by Bob Marley, right? And the artist, she wants to continue his legacy by influencing listeners with music that focuses on passion and humanitarianism. And and let me just take a time out and just point out here that once again, for all of your projects, remember the mission statement should not be something as simplistic as, oh, the mission is to make money, right? Because ideally, that's obviously, I mean, that's inherent, that goes without saying. We all know that you want to make money with your project. But I mean, ideally, you know, you want your project to be something more than that, something more significant, whether it's inspiring youth to act a certain way or whether it's trying to bring humanitarianism or something like that, or even if it's not for like direct social cause or something like that, it should have some deeper meaning than just making money, right? There's some deeper mission than just making money. You want to do something with your project, right? Besides make money. So just wanted to point that out, okay? Then manufacturing and distribution, okay? In this case, the student, he's going to be using TuneCore. Now, once again, there is no right or wrong answer, but he goes through the details of why he chose TuneCore, right? They give you 100% ownership and you get to keep your copyright, of course. He actually does, if I'm not mistaken, he does a kind of a side-by-side or line-by-line comparison between TuneCore and CD Baby, which is really good, right? He says why he chose one versus the other. So he's basically saying, look, I know the two big ones out there are TuneCore and CD Baby, but I chose this one and here's why, right? So he goes through the details of like the yearly costs, the percentage breakdown, um, commission. He even goes into like sync rights and stuff like that, I believe. Okay. They provide the barcode, of course. Remember, we went over that. TuneCore offers some of the best products and services on the market, such as band Zoogle at Venue, CD duplication, radio airplay, professional mastering, things like that. So just lots and lots of good information about why he chose the one that he did, right? Oh, he also talks about, we didn't really get to this month. I know that, I think in Cassie's class last month, you guys probably talked a little bit about performance rights organizations and some of the legalities. Kim talks about that too in chapters, you know, I think chapters like 16 or 17 or somewhere between like chapters 12 and 17, I believe. But performance rights organizations, right? ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC are the three big ones. Remember, and he's actually going into detail here for his Project 3 about how this relates a little bit to TuneCore and some of the advantages to this, right? He talks about the price. Okay, for remember, this is an EP. This is not an LP, so $6.99. That sounds about right for an EP, I would say. But remember, there's no right or wrong answer, just as long as you can explain it. He talks about profit earning. Again, you don't have to go into that much detail and speculation about how much money you're going to make and projections and things like that. For now, what we're concerned about in this class is just getting it out there, right? And mechanical royalties, print royalties. Remember, he goes into a lot of good detail about this stuff. streaming royalties, and it goes without saying too. I mean, I'm sure you guys talked about this last month, but if you are a musician, you do want to make sure to sign up with either CSAC, BMI, or ASCAP. One of the three. You really can only choose one of the three. I mean, if you choose more than that, trust me, you're not going to get any extra money with royalties. It's just easier for everybody to just choose one of those, but you definitely want to sign up because they can get you royalties, right? In fact, one of the stories that we heard recently is that like Lady Gaga has, I mean, not that she needs the money, right? But she has something like close to like $1 million in royalties that's just sitting there if she wanted to collect it, but she just hasn't got around to collecting it. But it just goes to show that like these royalties can add up, right? Okay, the next section is marketing and promotion. And then same thing. Remember, he's going to be talking about using social media, things like Tumblr, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, things like that. You probably want to have your own YouTube channel that's free. Now he's talking about, looks like he's going to be doing radio stations that at least will be contacted. He doesn't actually list like prices that he's going to and like that he's going to spend money on necessarily for ads, but you can at least contact radio stations. And I think we went over this last week a little bit, or at least with maybe a couple weeks ago with Project 2. But remember, whatever your project is, you can always do a press release and it doesn't cost you anything. And if you're not sure how to do a good press release, just look in the back of our textbook in the index, and we have a good sort of guide and sort of template as to things that you can follow to make a good press release. So just check out that in the appendix. And remember, anybody can do a press release for any project, and it doesn't cost you anything. You can do a press release and send it to any type of newspaper or magazine. Now, they don't have to pick it up, but you can send it to them for free, right? He talks about the target market, which again is a good thing that you want to do for your marketing strategy. Remember, demographics, niche, specialty markets, anything that you can do to narrow down the target a little bit would be great. And of course, you can certainly have more than one target market, but you at least want to identify one, right? In this case, 24 to 40, mainly hipsters. Brand of music that this project identifies with is Bob Marley's conscious and political views that illustrate the importance of fighting for human rights and compassion for people, right? So anybody that might fall under that bracket. So you see here, once again, not to sound like a broken record, but usually the most detail that you can provide, the better grade that you're going to get for this. In this case, you can see here, if we look at the word count, now he's doing 2,600 words. That's quite a bit. But remember, though, the more detail, the better. And particularly, though, just to highlight this once again, if we look at this, if we go on page 7 here and we go all the way to the top, and look how long his marketing, or I'm sorry, his manufacturing and distribution strategy is. You know, that alone is 1,400 words. Now, not to say that you have to do that in order to get a perfect score, but I mean, that just kind of shows you the amount of detail that this student put into this for that. Okay, so in general, the more detail that you can give Kim and I, the better that you'll do. Okay, and on that note, I think that we are basically at this point done. Remember, if you came in late, this will be on the archives later. This is recording, so we'll put this up on the YouTube page later on this evening or tomorrow. Sometimes it takes a long time for it to get put on YouTube because of the processing time, but it'll be up on there tomorrow. And if you missed last week's session, remember, go ahead and view that because we had some other examples that we showed you from last week on Project 3. But I think that you guys are doing fine. I think that everybody in the class is on a really, really good page for their, or on good track, I should say, for their progress for Project 3. Usually, oftentimes we have some students that are like way off track with their projects. A lot of times people don't listen to these go-to sessions. So what they do a lot of times is they think and they assume that the projects that they do for this class has to relate to their business plan for EBMS when in fact we established on the first date that it doesn't, right? But some people still don't listen to the go-to sessions. They still don't get that, and sometimes they're way off track when it comes to this last bit for project 3. But I don't think anybody in the class this month is in that category, so I think everybody's doing fine. And so if there are no other questions, I guess we'll kind of wrap things up. We don't have to do the attendance questions because we don't have an on-campus class this month, so don't have to worry about these. So other than that, remember, if you do have any last-minute questions, just go ahead and feel free to contact Kim and I, give us an email. And like I said as well, if you do any of these projects for real, which you should, even if it's not now, at least by the time that you get close to graduation, start to think about these things. You should do your projects for real. And if you do, let us know, because we always love to hear about any success stories. So with that being said, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Um, looks like we had David, Jackie, and Mike, and I think Howard may have been on here before. So thank you guys for attending. And I guess that'll kind of wrap things up. So everybody have a good rest of the night, and we'll see you at graduation, perhaps, right?